Today I'm going to be doing a review of the new FV217 Badger. This is the recent replacement in the 9.21 patch from Wargaming for World of Tanks. They replaced the 215B183 with this new FV217 Badger. And primarily the reason for this is because the line differed so much. Let's jump into the tech tree. So you can see the Badger, and if you're not familiar with the Tortoise, this is what the Tortoise looks like. So you can kind of see that the Badger is modeled more after the Tortoise, whereas the 183 looks nothing like the Tortoise. So I think they tried to have some consistency, so they wanted to change it, so they released the Badger. And to be honest, this Badger is just ridiculous. I've played a couple games in it. I probably overplayed it, but there's just some things that are relatively ridiculous, so we'll get right into that. Let's pull up tanks.gg. So I'm doing a comparison of the Badger versus the Object 263 and the T110E3. So these are all tier 10 tank destroyers from the UK, Russia, and the US. So if we look at these with base values, the gun handling looks relatively like it's got better rate of fire and reload time, but the penetration damage and module damage are all lower than the 263 and the T110E3. But the rate of fire and the reload time, which if you're familiar with the Tortoise, you're going to know is going to be a lot higher. The caliber is 123 versus 130 for the 263 and 155 for the E3. Shell velocity is almost the same, with the E3 being a little bit slower. All have a max range of 720. Ammo capacity is much higher, so potential damage for this Badger is 28,800 for the rounds that it can hold. So let's look at gun handling. Aim time is much less on the Badger, and it's kind of hit and miss. Has about the same dispersion, it's a little bit better. Has a really worse gun handling when moving, which for a non-turreted tank destroyer, it doesn't really make sense, but at the same time, none of these do have turrets, so it kind of makes sense. But the Badger falls in behind both the E3 and the 263 here. Let's look at mobility. It falls between the 263 and the E3 as far as mobility, so it's going to be faster than the T110E3, but slower than the Object 263, and the reverse speed is basically the same in that aspect, whereas it's slower, the Object 263. The 263 is, in my opinion, it's ridiculous how well that TD handles, and granted it's an open top, so it's vulnerable to HE rounds and HESH. You can do a lot of damage with those rounds on the 263, and the mobility of the 263 is just, the others pale in comparison, basically. So let's go down to, the T110E3, this is known as a very strong frontal American tank destroyer. It's really hard to get through unless you're firing premium. If you look at the armor and the health here, the hull armor on the front of the Badger is 355.6, whereas the T110E3 is 305. So this is another 50 millimeters of hull armor on the front. And if the T110E3 was known as a strong tank, the Badger is just popping off the charts here. It's got more track armor, better health. The engine health kind of falls between the Object 263 and the T110E3 though. But just this hull armor is a little ridiculous. The radio range is better. The fire chance is high of the two. It falls right in there with the T110E3. But the shell cost is almost as cheap as the 263. So what does this really mean this thing is really strong. So let's go to the full tankless, and we'll look at the 263 first. Let's see, 263. So the 3D model on the 263, and we'll even go to visual so it looks how it usually does. Let it model that up. So from the front, let's say we're looking right down the gun barrel. We're the same height as the gun. And let's change this to see penetration. This is 330 millimeters if we were shooting at it. If you can get this lower plate on the 263, it's only 180 millimeters. The front is really strong because of the angle of it. 53 degrees approximately through here. So this is 400 millimeters, 330, and you can see is about a 20% chance to go through with our 330 millimeters of penetration. Unless you can get next to the gun here, but as you can see, the angle of it is a ricochet. However, right around the gun on this side is a 67.7% chance and about 265 millimeters of armor. So if you're in at 300 millimeters and you can manage to hit this thing right in this gun mantlet, you can go through it on the sides here. The top obviously is a little harder to get through, and the bottom as well. So it does have weak spots on it. Now let's check out the T110E3. So the T110E3, let's go to the same model. So facing down the gun, if you can get the lower plate, it gets all the way down to 230 millimeters approximately. And you've got a 94% chance, and this is with, let's see if we can get the penetration to be about the same. Okay, well let's just use this one. It's close to 300 millimeters. So a 94% chance to penetrate with less than 300 millimeters of penetration. On the sides it gets a little tougher. You're pretty much not going to get through the mantlet on this T110E3, and this machine gun, even though it looks like a weak spot, it actually isn't. Because you can see here you've only got a 31% chance of penetrating that with the 300 millimeters because it's 322 millimeters thick. So, with that being said, let's look at this Badger. Alright, get that modeled up right down the gun. If you can get the lower plate, about 235 millimeters. And as you notice, you could have been able to get through the machine gun port on the top of the E3 if you were firing about we'll say 350 millimeters of penetration. So let's take this up to 320 here, and we'll see. So 235 in the front if it's not haul down, excuse me. But most people who drive the Badger and have any idea how to drive a tank destroyer, especially a non-turreted one, are going to make sure that this thing is haul down. But what gets really ridiculous is that there is no weak spots anywhere on the upper hull of this tank whatsoever. So if this guy gets hauled down, you are not getting through that. Why? Because the effective angle, the armor right here, is 280 millimeters thick. It's 215 up here, but the effective angle goes to 52 degrees. So you're going from 30 to 52. So it's a little thinner, but it's angled better. So we got 353 millimeters of armor up top. Down here we've got about 322. But the kick in the pants, and you can't get through the mantlet either. It's 355. But the result you can see down there is a bounce because of the thickness of that armor. I'm not sure if it's spaced, but you could see the best number you can get up here to penetrate is about 14% with 320 millimeters of penetration. So this thing is just strong as all get out, and I would assume that there would be a nerf coming or at least some weak spot on this thing. But other than that, I mean, even if he's angled, if you can manage to get to the side right here, but you see the result is absorbed because of the armor thicknesses. You got 6 millimeters, 25 millimeters of spaced armor. So unless you can manage to get it right in the drive wheel, I mean, and that's not even a guarantee, because that's all going to be absorbed, and we're firing APCR on this. So unless you can get the side right here, if you're frontal, you pretty much got to hope for somebody to be able to come in and flank this thing, or you're going to have one hell of a time. And because of the strength of this, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who have predicted that this was going to be what could be considered an overpowered tank. I had a match last night where there was 6 Badgers on the enemy team and there was 4 on ours, and they can just, as long as they have support, they can more or less just take the front, try to keep it hull down, and just plow through everything because of the rate of fire on it. Because the DPM is 3,500. If we compare that to, let's go to the Tier 9 Tortoise, DPM is 3,500, which is a really high DPM for any tank in the game. So 3,500 DPM on a tank. Let's see, the rate of fire, 8 rounds per minute on the Tortoise. Let's go back to the Badger. That's reload time. So 7.36 rounds per minute. So less than 10 seconds, it's going to be putting another round into you, and you're going to have a hell of a time getting through the front. So it's basically going to chew through anything that's in front of it unless you can manage to get lucky with a high roll of penetration or have somebody that tracks it and flanks it. It's overpowered as hell. I mean, take advantage of it while you can. It's a really strong tank. If you've already ground to it, I'm sure you already have played it and found out how it plays. The thing can just dominate corners. So the best thing I can suggest to take this down is to get that lower plate or track it and get around the sides, because just like the many of the premium tanks that they've been releasing, it does not have a frontal weak spot other than that lower plate. So good luck out there. I hope this was helpful for anybody who is looking for a little bit of information on this new tank. And don't forget to get the views in, hit like, comment below by all means, and don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.